On a quiet autumn evening, in a small town, the lives of two people intersected in a way that would unravel their carefully built worlds. Clara, a beloved kindergarten teacher, had always been known for her patience, her gentle smile, and the kindness she showed to children. She was 35, happily married to her high school sweetheart Tom, a mechanic in town. But behind the wholesome exterior, Clara harbored a secret that not even her closest friends or colleagues could have imagined. Jared, a 25-year-old gym trainer, was the first. He met Clara when she joined the gym a year ago, hoping to get back in shape. Their flirtations began innocently enough, teasing smiles, long looks after class. Jared, with his sculpted body and boyish charm, made Clara feel young and alive again. It wasn't long before their interactions escalated. The sneaky rendezvous after gym hours soon became a regular affair. Jared was full of energy and passion, a stark contrast to the predictable comfort of Clara's marriage. But Jared wasn't the only man in Clara's life. Luke, a construction worker, crossed paths with her next. He was doing repairs at the kindergarten, and one evening after work, Clara stayed late to help him clean up. His rough hands and rugged demeanor intrigued her. Soon enough, late-night conversations led to secret meetings, and Clara found herself entangled in yet another affair. Luke's intensity made her feel wanted in a way Tom hadn't in years. As if that weren't enough, there was Henry, a middle-aged businessman who often picked up his niece from Clara's kindergarten. Henry was sophisticated, successful, and offered Clara the thrill of a life she could never have imagined. He whisked her away on weekend trips under the guise of teacher conferences. He showered her with gifts, and Clara, hungry for attention, fell into the trap of his wealth and charisma. But living three lives was unsustainable. Clara had tried to juggle them, thinking she could manage it all without Tom suspecting. He was busy, too engrossed in his work to notice her growing distance. Or so she thought. One fateful day, Clara's double life began to unravel. Tom, who rarely questioned her whereabouts, stumbled upon an unusual phone bill while cleaning up the house. There were far too many late-night calls to numbers he didn't recognize. His gut told him something was off, but he pushed it aside, unwilling to believe his wife could be unfaithful. The truth, however, was far darker than he could have imagined. Clara had been spiraling for months, unable to choose between the men who each gave her a different piece of the life she craved. Her guilt was mounting, and soon it became too much to bear. In the mirror, Clara didn't recognize the woman she had become. Each affair had started with passion, but was now a tangled web of lies. One evening, everything came crashing down. Jared, Luke, and Henry, all unaware of each other, began to question Clara's commitment. They each noticed her growing distance and began pressing her for more time, for more honesty. The pressure mounted until Clara couldn't hold the facade any longer. It all culminated one evening when Clara returned home to find Tom waiting for her at the dining table, his face pale, the phone bill spread out in front of him. He didn't need to ask any questions. The look in his eyes said it all. Caught between the life she had destroyed and the man who had been her anchor for so long, Clara collapsed into a confession. She told Tom everything about Jared, Luke, and Henry. But instead of the anger she expected, Tom said nothing. He stood up quietly and walked out the door, leaving Clara to face the shattering silence of their broken marriage. In that moment, Clara realized the full weight of her choices. She wasn't just cheating on her husband. She had betrayed herself, and now there was no one left to comfort her. The men in her life had given her fleeting moments of excitement, but none could replace what she had lost. And in the end, Clara was left standing alone in a house full of memories that now felt like ashes of a life she could never rebuild. The silence in the house, after Tom left, was suffocating. Clara sat in the dimly lit living room, replaying her confession over and over. She could hardly believe the words had come from her own mouth. The weight of it all crushed her, and the reality of what she had done began to sink in. Tom was gone, and he might never come back. Days passed, and Clara's life unraveled further. Tom didn't return home, not even to collect his things. She heard from mutual friends that he had taken some time off work and was staying with his brother in another town. The house, once filled with warmth and routine, now felt cold and foreign. Every room held a memory of their life together, a life that had seemed perfect to everyone outside. But that illusion had been shattered, leaving only emptiness behind. Clara didn't know how to go on. Her days at the kindergarten became a struggle. The children's laughter, which once brought her joy, now felt like a cruel reminder of the innocence she had lost. She avoided eye contact with the parents, fearing they would somehow see her guilt in her eyes. Whispers started to swirl around the town, subtle at first, but growing louder with each passing day. People were noticing Tom's absence, and Clara's anxious demeanor didn't help. She could feel the weight of their judgment, even if no one said anything directly to her. Then, one afternoon, things took a turn she hadn't anticipated. It was Jared who reached out first. He had sensed something was wrong during their last encounter, when Clara had been distant, distracted. He texted her, asking if they could meet. Clara ignored the message, but Jared was persistent. He showed up at her door one evening, his usual confidence shaken by the tension he sensed between them. "Clara, we need to talk," he said, standing in the doorway, his arms crossed defensively. "I can't do this anymore, Jared," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've ruined everything." Jared's face fell. He wasn't used to being on the receiving end of rejection, especially not from her. "What are you talking about? We've been great together." "No," Clara shook her head, tears welling up. "It's not just you. There are others. And Tom knows. He's left me." Jared stood there dumbfounded. He had never imagined he was part of something bigger, that there were other men involved. For a moment he was silent, processing the betrayal, his betrayal and hers. Then without another word he turned and left, the weight of their affair suddenly too much for him to bear. But Clara's reckoning wasn't over. Luke, the rugged construction worker, was the next to sense something was wrong. He had started to suspect that Clara was pulling away, and when she stopped answering his calls, he decided to confront her. His arrival at her house, just days after Jared, felt like a repeat of the same painful scene. Clara confessed again that she had been unfaithful to him too, and that her life was falling apart. Unlike Jared, Luke didn't leave quietly. He was angry, furious even. He demanded to know why she had used him, why she had strung him along, all while seeing other men. His rage filled the small living room, and for a moment, Clara feared what he might do. But instead of lashing out, Luke stormed out, slamming the door behind him, leaving Clara shaking. It was Henry's reaction, however, that truly shocked her. The businessman, always composed, always in control, came to her not with anger, but with cold indifference. When Clara broke the news of her multiple affairs, Henry didn't seem surprised. He simply nodded, as if he had known all along. "I'm not interested in the mess you've made of your life, Clara," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "We had fun, but it's over. Don't contact me again." With that, he left, and Clara was finally alone. Completely, utterly alone. As the days turned into weeks, The full gravity of Clara's actions sank in. She had destroyed not just her marriage, but her reputation, her relationships, and the small sense of stability she had once cherished. The weight of her choices grew heavier with each passing day, and soon it became clear that there was no escaping the consequences. Tom never returned, and despite her attempts to reach out, he filed for divorce through a lawyer, ensuring that any further communication was handled through legal channels. The town, once so friendly, became an unforgiving place for Clara. She could feel the eyes of the other parents at the kindergarten on her, the whispered conversations that stopped whenever she walked by. And one morning, as she arrived at work, she found an envelope waiting for her at the front desk. Inside was a formal notice from the school board, a request for her resignation. The affairs had become too much of a scandal, and the school could no longer afford to have her on staff. She had been dismissed. With no husband, no job, and no future in the town that had once embraced her, Clara packed her things. She drove away, leaving behind the wreckage of her life, not knowing where she was headed, only knowing that there was nothing left for her here. As she looked in the rearview mirror, the town faded into the distance, a place where she would never return. Months passed after Clara left town, and her life spiraled further into isolation. She drifted from city to city, taking on odd jobs that barely sustained her, staying in cheap motels, or renting small rooms where no one knew her name. Each new place was an attempt to outrun her past, but the weight of her choices clung to her, following her like a shadow. She had cut ties with everyone she once knew, but the emptiness only deepened. One cold, rainy evening in a distant town, Clara found herself staring at the reflection of a woman she hardly recognized in a cracked motel mirror. She was thinner now, her once vibrant face gaunt with exhaustion. The youthful glow that had once drawn 3 men to her had vanished, replaced by a hollowness that no one would find alluring. It had been months since she'd spoken to Tom, and though he never responded to her letters, she continued to write to him, hoping he might one day forgive her. Her phone remained silent, Jared, Luke, and Henry long gone from her life, as they should have been. The thrill they had once brought her seemed so distant, almost unreal. What had driven her into their arms? Loneliness? A desire to feel something different, something exciting? Now it all seemed foolish, a fleeting fantasy that had cost her everything real. One night, after a particularly long shift, working as a waitress in a rundown diner, Clara received an unexpected phone call. It was from an unknown number, and for a moment she hesitated to answer. "Hello?" she asked tentatively. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, but it carried a serious tone. "Is this Clara Hawthorne?" "Yes," she replied cautiously. "This is Detective Mills from the Willow Creek Police Department. I'm calling in regard to your ex-husband, Tom Hawthorne." Clara's heart stopped. "Tom, is he okay? What happened?" The detective paused, and that silence was enough to fill Clara with dread. "There's been an accident. Your ex-husband is in critical condition. We found your contact information listed as next of kin in some of his old records. I thought you should know." Clara felt the world spin around her. "What happened?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "He was involved in a car accident last night. A drunk driver hit him. He's in the hospital, undergoing surgery. It's not looking good." The detective's words echoed in her mind. Tom, the man she had loved and betrayed, the man who had once been her world, was now fighting for his life. Without thinking, Clara packed a bag and rushed to the nearest bus station, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what she would do or say when she got there, but the need to see him, to be there for him, was overwhelming. The bus ride to Willow Creek felt like an eternity. As the landscape blurred by, Clara's mind raced with memories of her life with Tom, how they had met in high school, how he had proposed on a summer evening by the lake, and how they had once planned a future together, full of dreams that now felt like distant echoes. She wondered if Tom had ever forgiven her in his heart, if there was still a part of him that held on to the good times they had shared before everything went so wrong. When Clara finally arrived at the hospital, she was directed to the intensive care unit. Her hands trembled as she approached the front desk. "I'm here for Tom Hawthorne," she said, her voice shaking. The nurse gave her a sympathetic look. "He's still in surgery," she said softly. "It's touch and go, but you can wait in the family room." Clara sat alone in the sterile room, the minutes stretching into hours. The waiting was unbearable. Every time the door opened, her heart jumped, but each time it was just another doctor or nurse passing through. She could barely breathe under the weight of her guilt and the fear that she might never get the chance to say the things she needed to say to Tom. Finally, a doctor appeared, his face drawn with exhaustion. "Mrs. Hawthorne?" Clara stood quickly, her heart pounding. The doctor looked at her with a grave expression. "The surgery was successful, but Tom's condition is still critical. He's in a coma. We're monitoring him closely, but it's too early to tell if he'll recover." Clara's legs felt weak, and she slumped into the nearest chair. "Can I see him?" she whispered. The doctor nodded and led her down a long hallway to Tom's room. Inside, the beeping of machines filled the air, and Tom lay still in the bed, hooked up to wires and tubes, his face bruised and pale. Seeing him like that, so vulnerable and broken, shattered Clara's already fragile heart. She sat beside him, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch his. For a long moment she couldn't speak, couldn't find the words to express the storm of emotions swirling inside her. The guilt, the love, the regret, it all welled up, choking her. "I'm so sorry, Tom," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry for everything, for what I did to us, for the lies, for not being the wife you deserved. I wish I could take it all back." Her voice cracked as she continued. "I don't know if you can hear me, but I need you to know that I still love you. I never stopped, even when I lost my way. Please, please come back to me. We can't undo what happened, but maybe we can try to move forward. I don't know where that will lead, but if you're willing to stay, I'll try." Clara's heart leapt at his words, but she knew this wasn't a promise of reconciliation, not yet. It was a tentative first step, a fragile opening in the wall between them, and that was more than she had dared hope for. "I'll stay," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll stay as long as you'll have me." The months that followed were filled with quiet moments of rebuilding. They took things day by day, sharing meals, talking in the evenings, and slowly relearning how to be in each other's presence without the weight of the past crushing them. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the distance between them seemed too great to bridge. But there were also moments of warmth, small smiles, shared jokes that reminded Clara of the life they had once dreamed of together. As Tom grew stronger, both physically and emotionally, he began to let down his guard, piece by piece. There were no grand declarations of forgiveness, but there was an unspoken understanding between them. Tom no longer flinched when she touched his hand. Clara no longer feared that every conversation would end in a reminder of her betrayal. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the hills, Tom broke the comfortable silence. "Do you think we can ever really start over?" he asked, his voice quiet. Clara turned to him, her heart swelling with hope. "I don't know," she admitted. "But maybe we don't need to start over. Maybe we just keep moving forward, one step at a time." Tom nodded slowly, a faint smile touching his lips. For the first time in a long time, there was something like peace in his eyes. "Yeah," he said softly, "one step at a time." And in that moment, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the evening air grew cool, Clara realized that maybe, just maybe, they had found their way to something new. It wasn't perfect, and it would never be the same as before. But it was a chance, a fragile hope, and that was enough. For now, it was enough.